Hello and welcome back, warriors. I hope you had a wonderful spring break. I hope it was restful and as peaceful as you could make it, considering everything. For those of you who celebrate, I hope you had a happy Passover. If you celebrate Easter, I hope that was joyful as well. So today, guys, we are officially starting Unit 8. So Unit 8 is kind of a grab bag transitional unit. Our last unit was essentially like the reestablishment of European dominance through the Renaissance, the Reformation, and early colonialism and exploration in the New World. We left off talking about the establishment of early American colonies. Today, we're going to be talking about absolutism. This unit is all about a new political structure that develops during the 1600s and 1700s, and that is absolutism. By the end of the unit, we'll be looking at how absolutism leads to other political philosophies and how we see the development of the scientific revolution as well as the Enlightenment. And that is going to lead us into a period of absolutely transformational revolutions that we'll see in Unit 9. So what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be defining some terms and establishing the patterns that we're going to be looking at through the rest of this unit. So I promise this will be relatively quick. So if you will, make sure that you have your guided notes in front of you or that you are taking notes in a notebook. And let's jump back into some history. So here we go. So the first thing I want to do, like I said, is I want to define some terms. I want to talk about how absolutism is different from other forms of government that we've seen so far, and where absolutism is used during this period of sort of transitional history. So the first thing I want to do is define exactly what we mean when we say something is an absolute form of government. So absolutism is a form of government in which the monarchy has all the power of the state. An absolute monarch is both the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. They are everything combined into one. And usually there's only one monarch. It's not a matter of like the king and queen ruling together. You have all the power of the state is embodied in one single person. Now, in Europe, this idea is going to be defended by a political idea that is conceived as something called the divine right of kings. This is a Christian notion, often very much a Catholic notion, whereby monarchs justify their rule by the grace of God. That is, that monarchs hold the throne as a means of extending God's rule onto earth, that they are quasi-religious almost in their power. It's almost theocratic here, and that therefore to oppose a policy put in place by a monarch who is ordained and blessed by God is a sin in and of itself. So therefore, somebody who advocates to limit the power of the monarchy in, say, 17th century France is not just a political threat, but also a religious one. And therefore, their actions can be seen as heretical, not just a problem of the state. So this form of government, however, is not limited in terms of where you see it. This is a form of government that is transitional, like I said. It kind of marks the turning point between the old world, the feudal world of, say, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance era, and the new industrial world that is coming up for us next. This is sort of a period, this is sort of a system of ruling that develops in transition. And we see it all around the globe, not just in Western Europe. We see it in France and in Spain, in the Holy Roman Empire, particularly in the states of Austria and Prussia. We see it in the Russian Empire, but we also see it in the Ottoman Empire, in what is today Turkey. We see it in the Mughal Empire of India, the Safavid Empire of Persia, that is Iran, and we see it in Japan. So this is a form of government that exists around the world during this period of about 3 centuries. And so what we're going to do during this unit is look at how these places develop this system of governance, what it does in these various places, and how absolutism differs in Western and non-Western countries. So these are some of the absolute rulers that we will be talking about during this unit. You will notice, first and foremost, we have an awful lot of portraiture going on here. Some of it is clearly Western, some of it is non-Western. So just to kind of run down a few that you might recognize here. This right here, this is Louis XIV of France, also known as the Sun King. He rather famously said, "L'État c'est moi," I am the state. He is the absolutist of all absolute rulers, and we will come back to Louis many, many times. This is Peter the Great of Russia. Here we have Suleiman the Magnificent of the Ottoman Empire. Please note how amazing his hat is. Here we have Elizabeth the Great of Russia. We have, oh gosh, who am I? Oh, that's a Spanish king. I'm thinking it's going to be a Charles. I'm blanking on which one. Not the 5th and not the 6th. I will think of it. I think it's Charles II. This is James II from England. Bad things tend to happen to, or rather, yeah, that's James II right there. Bad things tend to happen to him. And over here we have, I think this is going to be Elizabeth of the Austrian Empire. Not entirely sure. I'll look it up for you. Over here we have Abu Akbar the Great of the Mughal Empire. You know you're super powerful when your bird has a matching necklace. And here we have Oda Nobunaga of Japan, and here is Shah Abbas the Great of the Safavid Empire. All of these individuals are absolute monarchs. Now, the question is, why does absolutism evolve? Well, first and foremost, if you consider the political period during which absolutism develops in each of these countries, you will see that there is a pattern. Absolutism develops in reaction to political instability. That what you see is that after periods of disunity, of civil war, of religious warfare, of all sorts of bad stuff that occurs, often what you see is the development of a strong centralized ruler who consolidates power in an attempt to prevent further disorder. So often what you see is a period of extreme instability, and then a period of enforced stability through absolutism. And that's part of the reason why people allow absolutism to happen, is because at least you know who's in charge, right? So in France, you see absolutism develop after 30 years of the wars of religion, during which Catholics and Protestants fought and killed each other. In Spain, following the Reconquista, you have Isabella and Ferdinand seize control, and they are absolute monarchs, and they establish sort of order after a period of disunity. In the Holy Roman Empire, the HRE, you had the 30 Years' War, again, Catholics versus Protestants as a result of the Protestant Reformation. In the Ottoman Empire, as the Ottoman Empire expanded out of what is today Turkey, out of Anatolia, they conquered into territories that were deeply religiously and ethnically diverse. And an absolute monarch gave them stability in a region that was unstable. The Mughal Empire was consolidating power over a Muslim minority and a Hindu majority. And so, therefore, again, religious and ethnic diversity meant that for the Mughals, having an absolute ruler was really helpful. In Japan, you had all the various like warlords, the shoguns, fighting for control, and establishing an absolute government was a way of keeping them from devolving into massive civil wars. So often in these regions, particularly in the non-Western regions that I'm showing you right here, the Ottoman Empire, the Safavid, and the Mughal, you had territories that were religiously diverse, that were often subject to a lot of instability, and so by providing one single centralized point of power, it allowed for the establishment of a more stable society. Again, Japan, with all of the various shogunates. Okay, so why did absolutism develop? Well, first of all, to provide stability, but also because absolutism is actually fairly practical as a governmental system. It's efficient. You don't have to worry about, like, how do you make decisions? Who in the legislature has this power? No, the power is in the hands of the king. The king makes all the decisions. That's it. It's a really simple form of governance. Like, who's in charge? Oh, you are. There's no question about whose power is where. And if your monarch is smart and thoughtful and serious and sober-minded, like, then absolutism can actually be a very, very efficient and like effective form of government. If you have a ruler who is ruling with the people in mind and who actually knows and understands their job, then it can be fine. Or at least not terrible. Let's go with not terrible. So in those cases, sometimes you had rulers who were definitely absolutists, who were actually fairly good at their jobs, and they were known as enlightened despots. A despot is like a dictator, but an enlightened despot is one that's not terrible, right? So an absolute monarch who is pretty serious about taking their job like as a ruler effectively, then this can be an efficient form of governance. Absolutism is also really powerful. Because the state concentrates power in the hands of the monarch needs to be able to force people to do what they want, even if those other people don't want to. And that meant that monarchs very often established standing armies. Now, if you were going to have standing armies, you need taxes to pay for them, which meant that you had to have a state bureaucracy capable of extracting taxes. So while the monarch was directly in charge of everything, absolutism actually led to the development of bureaucracies and a structure of government that was pretty efficient and effective. So absolutism often resulted in the creation of, essentially like the pre-modern form of the IRS or other bureaucratic institutions. But there are a lot of problems with absolutism. There's a reason why most of us don't want to go back to the days of absolutist rule. The first is that absolutism is only really effective or efficient if your monarch is good at their job. And if you were going to make the argument that the reason why that person gets to be in charge is because God says so, and because they happen to have the right kind of blood inside them, it is very possible that you wind up with a monarch who is unfit or irresponsible and who has total unlimited political power with no checks on them. So you can have people make decisions that are ill-considered and that are irresponsible. You can have monarchs who know that they don't know what they need to know, who know that they don't know anything about economic policy or military policy, and so therefore they rely on outside advisors, but those outside advisors could be corrupt, could have secondary goals in mind. And you also have problems where the rulers are simply unfit. For example, in Spain and throughout the Holy Roman Empire, the Habsburg family was in charge. The Habsburg royal family wanted to consolidate power within its royal family, which meant that there were severe problems with inbreeding, wherein they would marry cousin to cousin, or worse, they would marry uncle to niece over subsequent generations. This led to severe problems with inbreeding and lack of genetic drift, and ultimately led to problems with mental retardation and all sorts of issues within the Habsburg family. Most famously, there was a case where the Spanish king, the last of the Habsburg kings, didn't learn how to speak until he was 6. That meant he was unable to rule, and therefore he was subject to manipulation by advisors, and this could be a real problem. You also had problems where you might have a ruler who in normal circumstances would be capable of ruling, but maybe there was other secondary issues. For example, the Emperor Jahangir in the Mughal Empire in India was actually a pretty good emperor for the first portion of his reign, but he developed severe substance abuse problems. He was an alcoholic, and in the Mughal court it was fashionable to lace one's wine with opium, so he also developed an opium dependency as well. And this meant that he was very easily manipulated by those around him. And this was a big problem. And I'm going to talk more about this in the second video here.